Imagine standing before a wall so enormous that it stretches farther than the eye can see, climbing over mountains, disappearing into deserts, winding through forests, and crossing endless valleys. A wall so massive that millions of people have spent centuries wondering why it was built. Was it simply a wall? Or was it a monument built with the sweat, blood, and dreams of an entire civilization? Some say over 1 million people helped build it. Some say countless workers never returned home. And today, more than 2,300 years later, this breathtaking masterpiece still stands as one of humanity's greatest achievements. This is not just the story of a wall. This is the story of fear, power, sacrifice, and the birth of one of history's greatest empires. Welcome to the incredible history of the Great Wall of China. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because every week we uncover the greatest stories ever written by history. And now, let's travel back over 3,000 years. Our journey begins around 1046 BC, more than 3,000 years ago. China was nothing like the powerful nation we know today. Instead of one united country, the land was divided into many kingdoms ruled by different kings and noble families. These kingdoms constantly fought each other. Villages were burned, cities were conquered, families were separated. No one knew when war would arrive at their doorstep. At the same time, another danger was growing beyond China's northern grasslands. Powerful nomadic horsemen rode across the endless steppes. They were fast, they were fearless, and they could attack without warning before disappearing into the horizon. Northern villages lived in constant fear. To protect themselves, local rulers began building simple defensive walls. These were nothing like today's Great Wall. Most were made from packed earth, wooden fences, stones gathered from nearby hills. Mud mixed with straw workers layered wet earth inside wooden frames. Then they pounded it again and again until it became rock hard. This ancient building method is called rammed earth, and many sections built this way survived for thousands of years. These early walls were short. They protected only individual kingdoms. No one imagined they would someday become part of the largest defensive structure ever built by mankind. By 475 BC, China entered one of its most violent periods. Historians call it the Warring States period. 7 powerful kingdoms struggled for total control. Every ruler dreamed of becoming king over all China. Every year brought new battles, new invasions, new betrayals, and every kingdom strengthened its own walls. The states of Qin, Zhao, Yan, and others extended their defenses farther into mountains and valleys. Thousands of farmers became soldiers. Thousands of builders became laborers. Entire communities worked together to protect their homes. Yet no wall was ever long enough. No defense ever felt strong enough. Because somewhere beyond the northern horizon, enemy riders were always watching. But everything was about to change. Far to the west, in the kingdom of Qin, a young prince was preparing to reshape history forever. His name was Yingzheng. He was only 13 years old when he became king in 246 BC. Within a few decades, he would unite China, crown himself the first emperor, and begin one of the greatest construction projects the world has ever seen. The story of the Great Wall was only just beginning. The story begins in 259 BC in the ancient Chinese city of Handan, then part of the state of Zhao. Yingzheng was born into a world of war. His father, Prince Yiren of the state of Qin, had been sent away as a political hostage, common practice among rival kingdoms to ensure temporary peace. As a child, Yingzheng witnessed uncertainty, political intrigue, and the constant threat of violence. In 246 BC, at just 13 years old, he became king of Qin after his father's death. Because he was still a boy, experienced officials and ministers governed on his behalf. But behind his youthful appearance was an extraordinary ambition. He dreamed of ending centuries of war by bringing all of China under one ruler. Over the next 25 years, Yingzheng transformed the Qin army into the most powerful military force in East Asia. One by one, the rival kingdoms fell. Han, conquered in 230 BC. Zhao, conquered in 228 BC. Wei, conquered in 225 BC. Chu, conquered in 223 BC. Yan, Conquered in 222 BC, Qi, the final kingdom, surrendered in 221 BC. At approximately 38 years of age, Yingzheng had accomplished what no ruler before him could. For the first time in history, China was united under a single government. Rejecting the title of king, he proclaimed himself Qin Shi Huang, meaning first emperor of Qin. His reign marked the birth of imperial China. The first emperor introduced sweeping reforms. He standardized Chinese writing, weights and measures, currency, road systems, and the width of wagon axles, so carts could travel efficiently across the empire. These changes strengthened trade, communication, and administration. But even after uniting the kingdom, one serious threat remained. To the north, powerful nomadic horsemen, often identified in ancient Chinese records as the Xiongnu, continued to raid settlements along the frontier. The empire was united. Its borders were not yet secure. Qin Shi Huang knew that defending thousands of kilometers of frontier with soldiers alone would be impossible. Instead, he envisioned something unprecedented. Rather than leaving the old defensive walls isolated, he ordered that many existing walls built by former kingdoms be repaired, expanded, and linked together into a continuous defensive system. His goal was not to create a single, uninterrupted wall from coast to desert overnight, but a network of fortifications that could protect the northern frontier of the new empire. It was one of the boldest engineering projects ever attempted. If you're enjoying this journey through history, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and tell us in the comments, which ancient wonder should we explore next? Your support helps us bring these incredible stories to life. In 221 BC, imperial orders spread across China. Generals, engineers, craftsmen, soldiers, prisoners, and laborers were summoned from every corner of the empire. Mountains would be climbed, cliffs would be crossed, deserts would be challenged. An enormous wall was about to rise across northern China. But the greatest challenge was not the distance. It was the unimaginable human cost that this project would demand. By 221 BC, Qin Shi Huang, now about 38 years old, had united China under one empire. His vision was clear: strengthen and connect existing northern fortifications into a vast defensive network that could help protect the empire from raids. The order had been given. Now came the hardest part: building it. Imagine receiving an imperial command that could not be refused. Across the Qin Empire, hundreds of thousands of people, including soldiers, laborers, prisoners, and people assigned to compulsory state service, were sent north. There were no trucks, no cranes, no bulldozers, no modern machines. Everything had to be carried by human hands, horses, oxen, or simple carts. Builders climbed steep mountain ridges carrying baskets of stone on their backs. Others hauled heavy logs through dense forests. In dry regions, workers used layers of rammed earth. In rocky mountains, they relied on locally quarried stone. Every section was built using the materials available nearby. The terrain was relentless. Workers faced towering mountain peaks, deep valleys, dry deserts, bitter winter winds, blazing summer heat. Some sections rose along narrow ridgelines where one wrong step could mean a fatal fall. Food was often scarce. Water was difficult to transport. Many workers lived in temporary camps far from their families for months or even years. The work demanded extraordinary physical endurance. Building such massive defenses came at a terrible price. Historical records agree that the labor was harsh, though the exact number of deaths remains unknown. Many workers suffered from exhaustion, disease, accidents, hunger, and exposure to extreme weather. Over the centuries, stories spread that countless laborers died during construction. While later legends sometimes claim bodies were buried inside the wall itself, archaeologists have found no evidence that this was a standard construction practice. Instead, those who died were generally buried nearby, according to local customs whenever possible. Even so, the Great Wall became a lasting symbol of sacrifice. For many families, a loved one left to work on the frontier and never returned home. Building such massive defenses came at a terrible price. Historical records agree that the labor was harsh, though the exact number of deaths remains unknown. Many workers suffered from exhaustion, disease, accidents, hunger, and exposure to extreme weather. Over the centuries, stories spread that countless laborers died during construction. While later legends sometimes claim bodies were buried inside the wall itself, archaeologists have found no evidence that this was a standard construction practice. Instead, those who died were generally buried nearby according to local customs whenever possible. Even so, the Great Wall became a lasting symbol of sacrifice. For many families, a loved one left to work on the frontier and never returned home. One of China's most famous legends tells the story of Meng Jiangnu. According to the legend, her husband was forced to work on the Great Wall. After waiting for him in vain, she traveled a great distance to find him. When she learned that he had died, her grief was so overwhelming that part of the wall collapsed, revealing his remains. Although this is a legend rather than a historical event, it has been passed down for centuries as a powerful reminder of love, loss, and the suffering endured by ordinary people during great imperial projects. The Great Wall was never simply a long barrier of stone. Watchtowers stood at intervals along the frontier. Beacon towers could send warning signals using smoke by day and fire by night. Soldiers stationed along the wall monitored movement across the frontier and relayed messages rapidly across long distances. It was part fortress, part communication network, and part symbol of imperial authority. But after the death of Qin Shi Huang, the empire he built would soon begin to unravel. Yet the wall itself would survive, and future dynasties would transform it into something even greater than the first emperor could have imagined. The first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, had united China and connected many existing frontier walls into a vast defensive system. But history has one unchanging rule: no empire lasts forever. Within only a few years of the emperor's death, the mighty Qin Empire began to crumble. Many believed the Great Wall would disappear with it. Instead, its greatest chapters were still waiting to be written. In 210 BC, while traveling across his empire, Qin Shi Huang died at approximately 49 years of age. His death was kept secret for a time by officials who feared unrest. According to ancient accounts, the emperor's body was transported back toward the capital while the royal procession continued as though he were still alive. Not long afterward, political struggles weakened the government. Heavy taxes, forced labor, and widespread dissatisfaction fueled rebellion. By 206 BC, only 15 years after China had been unified, the Qin Dynasty had fallen. The empire that had changed history vanished. But the idea of defending China's northern frontier endured. The Han Dynasty, 206 BC to AD 220, inherited the challenge of protecting northern China. Rather than abandoning the frontier defenses, Han rulers repaired older sections and built new ones farther west. The wall helped guard important routes connected to the Silk Road, where merchants carried silk, spices, precious stones, paper, and ideas between China and distant lands. Watchtowers became centers of communication. Beacon fires and smoke signals could warn distant garrisons of approaching danger in remarkably little time. Across generations, different dynasties repaired, expanded, abandoned, or rebuilt sections of the frontier defenses depending on changing military needs. The Great Wall was never a single project completed once. It evolved over centuries. As centuries passed, some walls collapsed into the earth. Others were reclaimed by forests. Wind covered desert sections with sand. Rain eroded ancient rammed earth fortifications. Nature slowly reclaimed what humans had built. But history had one final transformation waiting. It would become the strongest, most beautiful version of the Great Wall ever constructed. If you're fascinated by the true stories behind history's greatest civilizations, this is the perfect time to subscribe. We bring cinematic documentaries that take you beyond the myths and into the real events that shaped our world. In AD 1368, the Ming Dynasty came to power after overthrowing the Yuan Dynasty, which had been established by the descendants of the Mongol Empire. The Ming rulers faced a familiar challenge. Powerful forces still threatened China's northern frontier. Instead of relying mainly on rammed earth, the Ming launched an ambitious rebuilding program. Engineers used carefully cut stone, strong-fired bricks, lime mortar, massive foundations designed to withstand harsh weather. Many of the famous sections visited today, including those near Beijing, were built or extensively rebuilt during the Ming period. The wall became taller, stronger, and more sophisticated than ever before. Thousands of watchtowers, forts, gates, and signal stations were integrated into the defensive network. Soldiers could observe the frontier from high vantage points. Smoke signals by day and fire by night carried warnings from tower to tower. Supply depots stored food, weapons, and equipment. The Great Wall had become far more than a barrier. It was a vast military system stretching across northern China. For centuries, it stood as the guardian of an empire. But as history moved into the modern age, the Great Wall would take on an entirely different role. Not as a battlefield, but as one of humanity's greatest cultural treasures. For more than 2,000 years, the Great Wall changed with China itself. Dynasties rose, dynasties fell, empires expanded and disappeared, armies marched across its towers, merchants traveled beside it, generations were born, lived and died beneath its shadow. And yet, the wall remained. What had once been built to defend an empire was slowly becoming something much greater, a symbol of an entire civilization. By the time the Ming Dynasty ended in 1644, the military importance of many sections of the Great Wall had begun to decline. The Ming government collapsed as internal rebellion and external pressure weakened the dynasty. The Qing Dynasty, established by the Manchus, took control of China. The frontier itself had changed. For centuries, Chinese rulers had repeatedly built walls to defend against threats from the north. But now the people who had once been beyond the frontier had established their own dynasty. The Great Wall no longer served the same central defensive role it once had. Parts of it were abandoned. Rain attacked the mortar. Wind carried away soil. Plants grew through cracks. Bricks were removed by local communities for houses and roads. Slowly, sections of the enormous structure began to disappear. But something remarkable happened. Even when soldiers stopped relying on the wall as a major military defense, people did not forget it. The Great Wall became a symbol of China's long history, a symbol of endurance, a symbol of human determination, and perhaps most importantly, a reminder that history is not created only by emperors. It is also created by ordinary people. The farmers who carried stones, the soldiers who guarded lonely towers, the craftsmen who shaped bricks, the families who waited for workers to return home. Their names may have disappeared, but their work survived. During the 20th century, historians, archaeologists, and conservation workers increasingly recognized that the Great Wall was not one continuous wall built at one time. It was a multi-dynastic network of walls, towers, fortresses, passes, and other defensive structures built and rebuilt over many centuries. Modern surveys estimate the entire Great Wall system at more than 20,000 kilometers, including structures from different historical periods. UNESCO World Heritage Center. That means the Great Wall is not simply one line across China. It is an enormous historical landscape. Some sections are magnificent. Others are little more than crumbling earthworks disappearing into the desert. Some were built more than 2,000 years ago. Others belong primarily to the Ming period. Together they tell one enormous story. Then came a moment that changed how the world viewed this ancient monument. In 1987, the Great Wall was officially placed on the UNESCO World Heritage List. UNESCO recognized it as a masterpiece of military architecture and an extraordinary testimony to the civilizations of ancient China. UNESCO World Heritage Center. The wall was no longer simply China's historical monument. It had become part of the world's shared cultural heritage. And today, conservation efforts continue because preserving something that stretches across thousands of kilometers is an enormous challenge. UNESCO World Heritage Center. If you've stayed with us all the way to this point, you have just traveled through more than 2,000 years of Chinese history. So don't leave yet. Subscribe to the channel because our next journey will take us into another extraordinary chapter of human history. There is one famous question people have asked for generations. Can the Great Wall of China be seen from the moon?